up, everybody? You're listening to this week's Custom Roofing and Construction Bearcat pregame show. We're going to recap last week's district loss to the Brock Eagles. We're not going to have a guest this week. We had a few people lined up, and they both just happened to fall through this week. So, with hopefully a playoff win over early this week, we'll have an opportunity to get our guests back next week. But after our recap of Brock, we're going to move on to our preview of early. So now that we've covered that, let's dive right into the game. Final, Brock 47, Pilot Point 13. Brock clinches the District 4 3A championship. The district ended up finishing pretty close to as expected. Brock finishes number 1. Pilot Point finishes number 2. Whitesboro finishes number 3. The one bit of a surprise was Peaster ended up taking the 4th spot over Paradise. Not shocking because I think a lot of people had Peaster in that 5 spot, so you just flip those two. District kind of falls as expected. So that being said, I know this, a lot of times you hear people say this and it kind of can be cliche. 34-point margin, but the final, that's not indicative of how competitive this game was. I understand how it may sound saying that, but this was a hard-fought competitive game. It was 27-13 at the start of the 4th quarter when Pilot Point had the ball driving to try to cut it within 1 score. And we're going to highlight some of the things that happened around that time, but that's kind of when the wheels fell off for the Bearcats. But before we do that, we're going to do the stats for both teams. So team stats, Pilot Point 166 yards rushing, 166 yards passing, 125 yards rushing, for a team total of 291 yards. Brock had 159 yards through the air, a big total of 439 yards on the ground for a team total offense of 597. Individual stat leaders, Wyatt Smith, 18 of 36, 166 yards and a touchdown. He did throw the interception in the late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter, I think to begin the 4th quarter. Ish Harris, 20 carries for 109 yards and a touchdown. And then Aiden Cox was the leading receiver. His streak of 100-yard consecutive games ends. He had 6 catches for 45 yards. Ish Harris was right behind him with 41 yards. For Brock, Tyler Moody, quarterback, 10 of 18 for 159 yards and a touchdown. Cutter Wilson, this number jumped out at me and shocked me because I didn't feel like he was this dominant. He had a few big runs that helped pile up the total yardage. But 26 carries, 341 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, doesn't matter how he got it. That's a lot of yards, and he earned them. And then the Minnesota commit, Nate Jones, leading receiver, 5 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. So we're going to do a segment here that's a little different than what we've done this year. For those of you who are fans of Sports Radio 1310 or 96.7 FM, The Ticket, from 10 to noon, the great Norm Hitchkiss is on there with his partner Donovan Lewis, and they do a segment every Monday after a Cowboys game. The 5 key plays you may not remember that had a major impact on the outcome of the game. We don't have 5 in this game, but we're gonna do 4. So I'm gonna dive right in here. At the end of the first half, Pilot Point is down 14-7. Brock is gonna get the ball to start the second half, so points here would be big for the Bearcats. Pilot Point is on the drive to try to tie the game. And this is the first time we've busted this play out this year, but Pilot Point ran a play that uses some beautiful screen action and is able to slip Ish Harris out of the backfield, and he makes an amazing run after catch that was just, I went back and pulled the film and watched it when I was preparing for this, and it was just an incredible run. He's contacted almost immediately after catching the ball, breaks that tackle, breaks a few more tackles along the way, spins out of some, and takes it from the Brock 43-yard line all the way down to the Brock 2-yard line with 26 seconds left and a Bearcat timeout left. And you and I were celebrating. We just couldn't get over the run. And then old Scoops Callahan, Chance chimed in and pointed out there was some laundry on the field. Turns out to be an ineligible receiver downfield on the Bearcats. So instead of 1st and goal at the 2-yard line, it was 3rd and 15 at the Brock 48-yard line, a 46-yard swing in field position. Ultimately, it led to 0 points on the drive, and we went into halftime with a 7-point deficit.
And you hit it. It was a perfect play call at the perfect with Coach Marsh and Chance. You know that Chance loves to play. The Devil's Advocate chimed in and told us about that penalty flag while we were finishing our celebration there. That penalty was an absolute killer. I think if that play would have stood, and I think the Bearcats would have punched that in from the 2, and we would have gone in 14-14 at half, and we're looking at a completely different ball game. And you called it by calling this the number one key play of the game. It's certainly the one that stood out to me and probably to most people looking back on that game.
Very similar to in 2008, we lost to Muleshoe. We had a fourth down at the goal line. We pushed Jarman in. They push him out. We push him in. They push him out. Falls at about the 1 foot line. Referees never ruled that he broke the plane, which he clearly did because I was pushing him and I broke the plane. But that was the difference between being up at halftime and being down at halftime in that case. This would be the difference of being tied. And, Brock comes out in the second half, scores a touchdown, goes up 2 scores. We answer to get back within 1. I mean, instead of being down a score at that point after our answer, it's a tie game late in the third quarter. It makes for a whole different ball game in that second half. Moving on to the second one. So this is, we've played a third quarter. I think we were outscored 14-7 in the fourth quarter. So it's a 2-possession game at the start of the fourth quarter. Pilot Point is driving, and then Wyatt Smith uncharacteristically makes a passing mistake and throws an interception to Brock. In the booth, we're talking about, man, that wasn't game over or anything, but it's a killer because you're down 2 scores. It's the start of the fourth quarter. You're on the move, and you throw an interception, and just when you think, okay, this is it, this could be the signal of the end, the first play that Brock comes out with after the interception is a Cutter Wilson run, and about 7 yards up the field, Aiden Cox, instead of going to wrap up Wilson, wraps the ball up, knocks it right out, and the freshman Gage Anderson jumps on it for the fumble recovery, and there's new life in the Bearcats after forcing that turnover.
Yeah, Ryan, and if you remember back to the Greg Davis offensive coordinator days with the Texas Longhorns back in the Mac Brown era, there was a lot of complaints about the way he called games, and in most cases it seemed to be pretty vanilla offense that he ran. But the one thing that I remember from that era that I loved that he always did, like clockwork, was he would go for the jugular the first play after a turnover and try to ride that wave of momentum and try to get an immediate score when the other team still is kind of in their field, so to speak, and kind of may have their head down. And so, man, I would have loved to seen us go, with the Aiden Cox fade immediately after that, try to catch them off guard. But unfortunately, like you said, we just couldn't turn that next possession into points in that situation. That would have been key.
Yeah, that would have been huge, which leads me to the third key play that you may not remember that has potentially a huge impact on the outcome of the game is on that drive. I wouldn't say it's immediately, but on that ensuing drive, there is a play where we sneak Colin Lynch out of the backside of the formation, and he's running what looks to be a fairly deep out and up. And he makes his out cut, and the safety comes up on the out cut. Well, about the time the safety comes up, Wyatt Smith releases the ball because this is a double move. Colin Lynch now starts the up portion of the out and up, and the safety realizes that he bit, and as Colin Lynch tries to complete the second part of his route, the safety jams his hand into the inside shoulder of Colin Lynch, kind of definitely impeding his progress, throwing him off his track. And if you remember, the ball was overthrown by only maybe a yard and a half, and that is definitely because of the safety coming up and throwing Colin Lynch off his route. And they let the guys play last night, and we were fairly happy with that. But if you remember, John, that is one where I pointed out to you and said, I like that they're letting them play, they're letting the game be decided on the field, but that in itself was a huge non-call by the officials.
Yeah, and again, Ron, I think Chance chimed in later on and played devil's advocate again and told us he thought both of them were kind of hand fighting on that. But we've certainly seen the offense get the benefit of the doubt on plays like that, and for that to be a no call, that was that, and for that to be a no call, that was the offensive game that people are playing. You always see the offense get the benefit of the doubt with the officials on plays like that, and that would have been huge.
Yeah, so the hand fighting I'm totally fine with on a go route where the ball's in the air, we're both running, trying to make a play on the ball, each one of us got our hands on each other. That's all fair, you know. But where it crosses the line from both guys hand fighting, both guys doing their part, is when the defender impedes the receiver from actually running his route. So if like I said, he's already in the up portion and they're running side by side, and we see that, that's one thing. But he actually stopped Colin Lynch from running a crisper, up on that route. And I think it's the difference of that ball being completed. Now, I don't know if Colin Lynch is going to take that all the way into the end zone, but from where it was at in the field, we're going to end up having the ball probably inside the point bank red zone on that side of the field. And it just turns into be a huge play because that leads us into the fourth key play that you may not remember, but ultimately had a huge impact, and that is the final play on that drive. So we're still on that drive following where we forced the Brock turnover after they forced one of ours. We have the ball 4th and inches, and earlier in the game we had it 4th and inches, and like we do all year, we get under center and we quarterback sneak Wyatt Smith. So I was saying this as I was kind of calling it live. We under center. Brock knew it was coming earlier, and they timed it poorly. So they came up, and then the linebackers who were responsible for blitzing that gap were kind of having to take a step back as the ball was snapped, which allowed Wyatt to get that first down. But I think it showed the coaching staff enough that, hey, this is what we do in this situation every play all year. Now would be a perfect time to run something off of that because they think they know what's coming. And I kind of hinted at that before the play, and that's exactly what the Bearcats did. They decided they were going to try to run something to catch Brock off guard, and I would have loved to see what they ultimately decided on, but coming out from under center, Wyatt Smith was stepped on by one of his linemen and is falling down, and miraculously, as he's falling down, is able to pitch the ball to Ish Harris. And Ish catches it, but he's kind of caught off guard. It was basically an all-out blitz coming from Brock, and it ended up in a 4-yard loss and a turnover on downs.
Yeah, Ryan, this was the second big momentum shifter that I had noted after the first big play that we talked about that got called back for the illegal man downfield. And I like the play call there as well, just like you did. Just unfortunate execution. And most people would say, yeah, just go with the quarterback sneak there, keep it simple. But remember, most offenses aren't used to going under center anymore. And if you remember in the same game, we saw Brock fumble their snap when they tried to go under center because now they use so much shotgun. They're not used to the offense they used to run last year, so they fumbled their snap. And ultimately, Ish Harris made a great tackle, and we had a goal line stand of our own. So you can say, hey, just go with the quarterback sneak, but that's not a given anymore either.
Yeah, and it's set up perfect. So you run plays like that all year. One, because they're effective, but you also, as a staff, you recognize I'm developing a trend here. I'm developing a pattern, and you use that to your advantage. Okay, I have a tendency here. The defense knows what's coming. You use your own tendency against the defense. And, I don't always like going back to my days just because it, probably gets old to listen to. But in 08, we were playing Pottsboro for the district championship early that district season. And we did the exact same thing on the goal line at the end of the first half. They know what's coming. That quarterback sneak, we called it wedge. Everyone knows it's coming. The coaches didn't even tell us offensive linemen that that's not the play that was coming. I think they might have told Nordy, the left tackle, but I'm not even confident they told him, like, it's wedge. But Coach Felt told Seth to pitch it to Jarman and have Jarman run our outside zone play. And while there's a pile of 19 bodies at the goal line, Jarman's caught the pitch and is literally walking in the end zone for a touchdown. That's potentially what we could have had happen there on that 4th down. Pottsboro knew the tendency that night. Brock knows the tendency and what's coming. And you try to capitalize on that and catch them by surprise. And like you said, execution-wise, it just didn't work out on that particular play. Those are the 4 key plays that, like I said, stick out to me that weren't like huge plays. They're not in the box score. But, man, they really had a major impact on what could have potentially been the outcome of this game.
Absolutely.
So, now that we've done some of that, we've recapped some of the action. I want to talk about potential, this is way jumping the gun, but while we're on the topic with Brock and what we saw Friday night, there were a lot of things that I think Brock put on film against us that I think are going to be very beneficial to this Bearcat team come early December if we're lucky enough to make it that far and have a matchup with them. It just baffled me, their unwillingness to send 2 guys over the top of Aiden Cox. At least it seemed to us. They did have a safety playing deep in the middle, but only on 3rd and longs did they seem to roll it over to him. There were even times where the ball's on the left hash and they're not even running their corner all the way to man up the receiver outside the far numbers. So I'm hopeful we play these guys again. There's enough on film to say that we can make this competitive game and maybe get the other side of it this time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm with you, Ryan. I mean, we left Brock last season, and I think both of us looked at each other like, wow, we might have just seen the eventual state champion with that Brock Eagle team. They looked so disciplined. They were so committed in what they did, and Cash Jones just looked so outstanding and unstoppable. They had Chris Powell-Freeman, who was another fast back. I mean, they were just like an army that was just so well put together. And they got a new coach, Billy Mathis, this year. You can tell they've obviously switched to that spread, multiple offense. They're committed to throwing the ball a lot more. Now they've probably developed Nathan Jones a little bit more, and he's a heck of a target there. And on third and key downs, they seem to always go to him, and taking nothing away from their current running game, but they don't have the Cash Jones that they did. So I'm with you. I mean, if we face them again in the 4th round, now I will say there's probably a little bit too much 4th round playoff talk already because we got a tough road ahead of us, and so does everybody else. And I heard the CS Designs post-game show with Coach Marsh and Chance Kirby, and man, there was a lot of 4th round playoff talk, and man, let's just take it. Let's go 0-0 and let's try to win this week because we got a tough opponent in front of us. But yeah, I'm with you in the rematch. Certainly, I would feel better this year versus that last year Brock Eagle team.
And, you're absolutely right with the 4th round playoff talk. That being said, though, I feel like it's worth noting. And last thing I want to really talk about, so the score, I mentioned it in the beginning of this, the show, 34 points. That seems like a huge spread, right? But I want to recap the last 21 points of that game. It's a 14-point game or 15-point game maybe because of a missed extra point on our end. And you called it on the show or on the broadcast. The defense started to get desperate, and what I mean by that is we had to maybe get out of character a little. We were really desperate to stop the run to try to get the ball back, and it was a 3rd and short, and you had called. We'd gotten overly aggressive and really left the seam open for a tight end that's running routes there that's committed to play tight end in the Big Ten. Those tight ends are pretty good. Iowa and Wisconsin seem to put out 1 or 2 guys every year, that Big Ten, so they have a Big Ten tight end commit running up the seam. You kind of called it, but that was out of character because that was a desperation moment for the Bearcats. We need to stop the run here. If they throw the ball in the air, we're going to take our chances, and so got a little bit out of position on defense, and that's what they did. They attacked the seam. They scored a touchdown. That's a 3-score game with about 5-6 minutes to go. So, there's a few adjustments made here and there. You can see that maybe we get the touchdown before the half ends. There's a few things where now you see it. Well, the last 2 touchdowns, after that touchdown, they kick it off and they do this short little pooch kick, and we try to run up and field it, and we botch it, and Brock jumps on it, and now they get the ball 1st and 10 at the Bearcat 25-yard line. They punch it in. That's now an extra touchdown that is really uncharacteristic and wouldn't happen in a competitive game. And then right after that, they do the same thing, and this time we don't even botch trying to field it. Nobody runs over there to field it at all. Brock gets on it, puts another one in the end zone. So the last 3 touchdowns, one was a defense that was being forced into doing something out of character to try to, force a stop. And the last 2 were just, the game was up, felt like it was out of hand, not making heads-up play on special teams, and it snowballs on you. But, if you actually look at that and think about that, know how some of the other games went, you don't see like this one was too far out of reach, played again, as long as, we have to execute on every down of a playoff matchup, and I think that's a tough task, but you can see it, which is the whole point of this. You can see how it could happen, unlike last year when you and I just didn't really see how it could happen.
Nothing to hang our heads about, playing the number 2 team in the state and really playing them a real tough 3 quarters. And, we did have those mental lapses there and got a little desperate in the 4th quarter. The game got away from them. But like I said, nothing to hang our hats about. Losing can be a great motivator, right? And, our previous loss was to Gunner, and then we rip off 6 straight wins. But also, I think it probably identified some things that we can get better at. Ultimate motivation when you lose, and so that's what I'm hopeful for out of this game. The outcome is that our Bearcats really regroup this week at practice and get refocused and improve on a couple of things, especially that kickoff return.
Well, one last question before I take us out of here. After the last time we lost, we rattled off 6 straight wins. Well, we just lost last Friday. What would 6 straight wins mean for us if we rattle them off here?
A state champion.
Yeah, well, the first step of winning 6 straight is winning 1, and we're going to discuss that one when we come back with the preview of the opening playoff game against the early Longhorns. So we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll come back for that.
Hey Bearcat fans, living in North Texas, you know all about bad weather. When bad weather does strike, look no further than James Floyd's Custom Roofing and Construction. Custom Roofing and Construction has built their business off of quality work and customer referrals. Let their friendly and knowledgeable staff ensure the project runs smoothly from start to finish. You can visit Custom Roofing and Construction on their website, customroofingdallas.com, or give them a call at 214-274-8353.
Welcome back to the Custom Roofing and Construction Bearcat pregame show. Like I said, unfortunately, we had a couple guests lined up. They fell through late this week, so no guests this week, which just means we had a little bit more time to recap last week, and we'll have a little bit more time to preview this week. So, as I've mentioned a few times in my past here on doing things for PollyPointBearcats.com, Coach Felt used to break our seasons down into 3 individual seasons. Season 1 was your non-district schedule. Your non-district schedule was kind of about finding who you were, finding your identity, who your key players were going to be, how you actually start developing, into who you're ultimately going to be when it matters. Season 2 is that district schedule, which, ultimately you want to win a district championship, but it's not just about that. It's also about, okay, now we know who we are. Let's take each and every week to improve on that and really build this team up and into our identity. So when we start season 3, which is the season that really matters, playoff season, you are, you're fine-tuned and you're ideally playing the best football you've played all year. So now that we're here, it's playoff season, it's time. Last year, we had a great game against Boyd. We took a thumping to Brock. And then we go into the playoffs not really knowing how we feel about ourselves, and we rattle off a deep playoff run past Thanksgiving. Win some games big and ultimately give the eventual state championships a real run for their money at Tarleton State. I think the Bearcats are playing better football right now than they were at this very point last year. What do you think about that assessment of this Bearcat team?
Well, Big 5-0, I agree with you, man. I think that we have more weapons all in all this season, and probably a more capable, dynamic passing game that we've seen out of this team. And we have the ability to get more people involved. And we've seen guys like Gage Anderson, Crew Chandler, Cade Carter, Colin Lynch, they've all seemed to take big strides this season and become, targets in key moments. And of course, not even mentioning our normal guys, Ish Harris and Aiden Cox and Wyatt Smith. But I think that the surrounding cast is even greater this year. Of course, we're going to be missing Big Play Jay. He seemed to always come through for us last year in the playoffs, so we'll see if some guys can step up and kind of fill that role. But one thing I'll say is that, even though I think we both think we're playing better football at this point compared to last year, I think that this first round opponent is much improved over the first round opponent of last season. Last season, we started out with Clyde, and we kind of boat raced on 56-16, and it was basically over at half. We got our JV in for most of the second half there at Tarleton, and you and I don't know if we expected that, but looking back, I think Clyde had some key injuries and things, and they just weren't they really weren't up to what I see out of these early Longhorns that we're going to be playing. So I don't see this game against Early playing out like that, even though I think, like you said, we're probably at a better spot than we were at this point last year.
Yeah, I definitely think we are. I think we played a even more solid district schedule this year. We had a really competitive game against Brock going into the playoffs. I think we should have all the confidence in the world right now, and I think we're going to see that Friday night against the Early Longhorns. They are the next opponent. I am about to take a page from the Bearcat Insider pregame show that they did last year, where they actually try to talk about the city some before we talk about the team, because once we start getting into the playoffs, start playing some teams from further West Texas, don't really have much of a history, don't know much about them. So Early Texas is in Brown County in it's kind of west central Texas. Population is estimated at around 3,160 people. The area that Early is in was settled in the early 1850s by a man named Welcome W. Chandler. So his first name was Welcome. And but this area got their first post office in town, actually in Welcome W. Chandler's home in 1858. So that's kind of what makes you, at least back then, kind of what makes you a city, makes you an incorporated area, is a post office, and it was being run out of Mr. Chandler's home in 1858. But that was actually kind of the Brownwood community. So that was the city of Brownwood and the surrounding areas. Well, in 1951, Early separated from Brownwood. They had a few schools in town. They had a population of about 600 at the time. In 1951, they became the town of Early. So that is a little bit of the history of the city. There seems to be no people of enough importance to be listed on the World Wide Web as from Early, Texas. So I couldn't find any most famous person from Early, Texas. I mean, there is a most famous person from Early, Texas. Just, I don't know who they are, right? We don't know who they are. I'm sure somebody from Early might know. Maybe we can get them on the Sunset Pools of North Texas live
They'll
chat.
tell us on the chat line.
Somebody, yeah, somebody is, from famous from Early. Now to the football team. Early finished third in District 3A. They finished season 8-2, and they went 3-2 in district. Early scores 39 points per game and only allows 17, so that's a pretty healthy margin of plus 22 in point differential. They started off district 0-2 with losses to Jim Ned, who won the district, and Breckenridge, who finished second. But then they rallied with 3 consecutive wins over Clyde, San Angelo, Texas Leadership Charter Academy, who might be the one team I found that's worse than Nakona. And then the surprising one was their week 11, I guess, last week, their upset of Wall, which kind of threw us into a frenzy and set this whole matchup up. We were expecting Breckenridge to finish third, which meant that's who we were going to play. Breckenridge has kind of been a hot team this year, up and coming. Reminds me of Jim Ned in 2019 when we played them in the first round and beat them. A lot of young guys, it seems, over there, and they're really up and coming. But Early's the opponent. So that's kind of their numbers and a little bit about them. As far as schematics, though, John, their schemes, offensively, defensively, why don't you get us a little more familiar with what to expect?
Yeah, Ryan. Early So offensively, they're very similar to our Bearcats. They feature multiple personnel groupings, and they're going to be more pass heavy than run heavy. They have a very capable offensive team with a real solid quarterback, running back, and a pair of wide receivers that I'll get into in the players to watch. They're mainly out of shotgun multiple. The main difference that I've seen from our Bearcat offense on film is they like to use that little bunch formation with three receivers, and I did see them run a pass trick play for a touchdown. And I'm not sure if that was against Wall, but it was a key touchdown for them. So you got to watch out for the tricks. And then on defense, the early Longhorns will operate out of a 4-3 man scheme. Their backers are run first players, and the secondary operates heavily out of man coverage. They're real good at what they do. They got a stable group of solid defensive players. And like you said, they're only giving up 16, 17 points per game. And that also includes their biggest loss of the season was 48-7 to Jim Ned. And so that kind of skews that average up. So 17 is kind of misleading. I mean, they got a really, really solid defense, and they've had a couple of shutouts on the year.
Well, a stingy defense and an offense that can throw the ball around, that is something that might present a challenge to this Bearcat team, because at times we've struggled to defend the pass. There have been times where a stingy defense can limit the way it take us a little bit to get going. So, I mean, this is not going to be last year's first-round matchup against Clyde for sure, it sounds like. You hinted at a couple receivers that you were going to talk about, so let's move on that way and go to John's players to watch.
Yeah, and players to watch for the early Longhorns. Their quarterback is number 10. He's a junior. It's Jackson Price, 6'1", 165. They got him listed running a 4.7 40. He's a tall, lean kid with a good arm, runs the offense efficiently. He's a good leader. He's listed at 4.7 40, but his running stats aren't that great. He's negative 27 rushing yards on the season. That's really from sacks, so he's not much of a run threat. He's a complete passing threat, though. He's got 1,796 yards passing. He's passing at 61% completion percentage, 25 touchdowns through the air. So he's averaging about 200 yards per game through the air. And he does not play defense, so we shouldn't see him on the defensive side. And then their real playmaker is a running back, senior number 3, Trey Beam. He's listed 5'10", 165, runs a 4.7 40. He's a speedster. He's super athletic. He's their playmaker. He's got 167 carries on the year for 1,125 yards. He averages 6.7 yards per carry. In 7 out of the 10 games, he's had 100 plus yards on the ground, and he's got 11 TDs on the ground this season. And defensively, he's a force as well. He's got 55 total tackles from the linebacker spot, 6 sacks, 8 hurries, and 19 tackles for loss. So he likes to blitz, and he gets in the backfield, and he makes plays. So number 3, Trey Beam, is a serious guy to watch out for. And then you hinted at the wide receiver core. They've got 2 guys that are key wide receivers for them. Number 2, junior wide receiver defensive back Jeremy Brown. He's listed at 5'8", 135. Runs a 4.6 40, so he's another speedster. He's a smaller guy. But he's their leading receiver with 47 receptions, 635 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns on the year. And defensively, he's got 37 tackles and 37 tackles with 3 of them coming for loss on the season. So he plays both ways. And then the guy I really like, and on film you can really see it, it's number 4, Jon Stewart Gordon. He's a junior wide receiver, defensive back, listed at 5'8", 150, runs a 4.7 40. He's a slot receiver. He's my favorite player to watch on that early team. Man, when he gets his hands on the ball, he is a tough dude to bring down. He runs extremely hard. I mean, he's like Mike Allstott, but in Cole Beasley's body. I mean, that guy, he gives it his all. He's got 33 receptions, 520 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the season receiving. And then defensively, he's in on 24 tackles, and he's a ball hawk on defense from the secondary position. He's got 5 interceptions. So you got to watch out for number 4, Jon Stewart Gordon. So that's it for the early Longhorns. For our Pilot Point Bearcats, of course, I'm going to highlight our normal guys. Number 5, junior quarterback Wyatt Smith. He's got 2,167 passing yards now in the season, 18 touchdowns, only four INTs. I think you and I both have been real impressed with the way he takes care of the ball. A couple of those INTs were late in halves or late in the game where he's just going down the field. And he's got six TDs rushing, so Wyatt Smith is our guy at QB. And then, of course, Ish Harris, number 21, our senior running back, defensive back, linebacker. Man, he really stepped it up against Brock, had a great game. He's up to 831 yards now in the season, rushing with 14 touchdowns on the ground. And he's got 4 games with 100-plus rushing on the ground now. And he's really improved his receiving. He's got 191 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving now, and he's got that ability defensively to really change the game with an INT or a big hit, a forced fumble. And then, of course, Aiden Cox, he didn't have his 100 yards last week against Brock, but I think he'll get back on track again this week against Early Longhorns. He's got 1,352 yards receiving and 13 touchdowns on the season. And, of course, he punts and does it all from his defensive end position. He's going to be counted on to bring a pass rush as well. And then let me highlight, one of my favorite Bearcats, number 27, senior Curly Brockman. He stands about 6'6" and weighs 245. For those early fans that are listening,
he plays like it.
Exactly. He's our leading tackler, 93 tackles on the season. So whenever you see number 3 getting upended, it's going to be Curly Brockman, number 27, on the tackle. So those are the players to watch, Ryan.
Yeah, Curly sure plays that way, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
So he's going to have a big game on the defensive side. I really liked last week. Ish came out with some urgency. We really did an excellent job of running the ball last week, which I think against a lesser opponent's really going to open up the passing game, and we fine-tune it. I mean, this offense can find true balance. I think that is something to look for, but, you have your 3 keys to the game, so tell me what your 3 keys to the game are.
Yeah, Ryan, key number 3. Key number 3, I've got 21 needs to be greater than 3. So 21, of course, Ish Harris had a great game against Brock, and hopefully he follows that up. If he has a similar game, I think we're in good shape. I'm putting the over/under on two flexes. If he flexes on them twice in this game, I think we get the win, two times or more. But I tell you what, this number 3, Trey Beam, for the early Longhorns, he's a heck of a playmaker. Like I say, he's got 1,125 yards on the season in 10 games. 7 out of the 10 games he's had 100+ yards on the ground. So it's going to be an interesting matchup with Trey Beam versus Ish Harris. So that's key number 3. And key number 2. So key number 2, I harp on this often, especially when the 2 teams are as close on paper like these 2 teams appear to be. And it's just super critical in these close games, and it's winning that turnover battle in the plus-minus area. And I think when I looked at the early Longhorn upset against Wall, they upset Wall 24-14, and most people were, like I said, expecting Wall to win. They had came up with 2 key turnovers, and they were both in the red zone, and they were both fumble recoveries. So that really shifted the momentum in that game, and it looked to me like Early was hyped up for that game, and they raised the level of their play because they knew that they were not favorites against Wall. They did come up with that victory, and I think those 2 turnovers really played a key role in that. And I like our odds here because, like we said, Wyatt Smith's done a good job of really taking care of that ball this season. If that continues, then if we end up on the plus side of the turnovers, then I think we're in good shape on Friday. And key number 1. Hey, ho, let's go. Hey, ho, let's go. Hey, ho, let's go. Hey, ho, let's go. Forming in a straight line. Dun, dun. They're going through a tight one. The kids are losing their minds. The Blitzkrieg Bop. So hey, Ryan, that's from the Ramones right there, bro. That's the stadium anthem, Blitzkrieg Bop from the Ramones. And there's a lot of innuendos in there, but I think the pass rush is going to be just key in this thing, and the blitzing from both teams is going to be key. And I think that this game is going to be a lot more like the shallow water playoff game that we saw last year, that frenetic pace. We were talking about their coaching staff all seemed to be, have an IV of Red Bull into them. They were so jazzed for that game. And I think the early Longhorns are going to come out jazzed like that as well. And, the Blitzkrieg Bop has kind of a frenetic pace to it. And I think this game is going to be the same way, at least through three quarters. I think we're going to see, all we can handle out of these early Longhorns. But fourth quarter, we'll see who really comes through at the end. I think Dave Campbell's has our Pilot Point Bearcats as 5-point favorites. Personally, I've got us by 10, but I think it's going to be tough, and I think that they're a capable opponent, and it's going to be a lot tougher than our first round from last year for sure.
Well, excellent work. Yeah, I mean, it does sound that way, and I know, Professor Diggs was talking about, this District 3A is much tougher than it was last year with the emergence of Breckenridge. Breckenridge coming in and being a real solid number 2 team dropped what probably should have been the number 2 team early, or maybe even Wall, but early comes in and upsets Wall. And you got 4 solid teams coming out of that district. I know the last 2 years we've been paired up with that district. District 4, I think, has gotten the better of District 3 with maybe Jim Ned, the only team getting any wins last year. And, head-to-head, we've done pretty well against this district. But this will be the last time that it matches up like this with realignment coming. And this will be the last chance for District 3 to kind of get one over on us. And so it's going to be a tough one Friday night in Saginaw. I'm pretty excited about the location. Last time I was in the building, it worked out pretty well for Pilot Point in what was supposed to be a close game.
Homer call of the year.
That was a 2009 Homer call of the year on the aforementioned The Ticket radio station.
I was there.
That was also a big playoff win for the Bearcats. So we're going to hope that maybe in a little bit less stressful fashion, Pilot Point repeats that history and comes away with a playoff victory Friday night. I think Chance would kill me if I failed to mention that due to UIL rules, this game will be audio only. This is not us deciding not to put the game on film. UIL is nice enough to allow us to film all the regular season games, but once playoffs start, we can only bring you audio, so the game will still be found in the exact place that you find every game. It'll just be audio only, so we'll try to paint the best picture we can Friday night of hopefully the Bearcats coming out on top over the early Longhorns. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is a big thing, especially with it being audio only. Subscribe. Got some new content. Bearcat Insider, as always. Professor Diggs on there, who's going to be bringing lots of previews to these playoff matchups and give you a lot more information on these teams than John and I can. Thanks for being with us this week on the Custom Roofing and Construction Bearcat pregame show. We'll be there Friday night in Saginaw as the Pilot Point Bearcats open up the playoffs with the matchup against the early Longhorns. Looking forward to hopefully bringing you a Bearcat win and doing another pregame show next week. So with that being said, that's all we have for you tonight.
Go Bearcats.